Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Later in the webinar, you will have the opportunity to submit text questions via Slido. Please visit slido.com and enter the hashtag ITReg23. Please do not submit questions via GoToWebinar. We will not be able to answer these. Today's webinar is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email in the upcoming weeks. I'd now like to introduce Tracy Drabble, Deputy Director, Digital and Service Design, MHRA. Tracy, welcome.
Thank you very much. A warm welcome to all attendees for joining our webinar today. We really do appreciate you taking the time to attend our first industry-wide engagement on how MHRA intends to manage its end-to-end regulatory lifecycle and submission processes. As Tracy mentioned, my name's Tracy Drabble and I'm Deputy Director for Digital and Service Design. I'll be your host today. So a few notes about today before we get started. First of all, in terms of timings, this webinar will last around 75 minutes. As Tracy mentioned, the webinar is going to be recorded and a link will be sent out to delegates to access the recording once it's available. The recording, though, will not include the Q&A session at the end. In terms of questions, we will address questions at the end of the presentation. We'll answer as many questions as we can in an aggregated way so that we can address as many as possible. If you do have a question that's not been answered during this session, we recommend getting in touch with us by adding your question and comments into the post-webinar survey. So now we've covered a few housekeeping points. I'd like to talk about the purpose of the webinar today. The purpose is to introduce you to our project, explain a bit about our vision and scope, update you on what's happened so far, what's to come, and things to look out for. So let's take a look at the agenda. So we're going to start off, first of all, with an approach around the project. Why and how are we delivering the project? We're then going to also talk about our discovery phase in a bit more detail. Then we'll move on to delivering the first release, and then we'll talk about what comes next. We'll have a short break and then go into a question and answer session. We're going to limit the question and answer session to around 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the variety of questions, but we will follow up questions that aren't able to be asked at a later date. Before we get started, I'd just like to thank Claire and Laura for attending today and ask them both to introduce themselves as part of their presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Laura and Claire now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy. So I'll start and take the first couple of slides. My name is Laura Squire and I am the Chief Healthcare Quality and Access Officer. And I'm also the Senior Responsible Owner for the Regulatory Management System. What that means when we are delivering an IT system is generally we have somebody from the business that's going to benefit most from it appointed as Senior Responsible Owner. And the parts of MHRA which are under my responsibility include those that take all the licensing decisions for medicines, all of the inspectorate, and also I'm responsible for devices registration. So you can imagine we have the opportunity to benefit enormously from the RMS. So if we just move to the next slide. So the first couple of slides basically cover who, what, when, why we're doing this and what is it. So the first, what is a regulatory management system? Well, it's going to be a new, modern, flexible IT system which will enable the MHRA to better undertake its work to ensure safe access to medicines much more efficiently. It will also enable industry to have better visibility of that work and to understand the stage that you are at with your applications. And it will improve our capability to use data to inform our risk-benefit decisions. We expect it to happen. We are building it now, and we've been building it since the 1st of July last year. And our commitment is to issue a minimum viable product later this year. So that will be a product which enables you and the staff in the MHRA to use the system, but it will be further iterated with improvements through the year following the first release. So why are we doing it now? The MHRA is one of the big drivers for this. Is the MHRA is no longer in the EU, and the UK is no longer in the EU, and we're not part of the EMA. The large IT system Sentinel that we have principally, and Lotus Notes that we rely on for the delivery of our work at the moment, are built around the European system, and we no longer need a system which is based around making decisions with multiple member states. We need something of our own. Also, digital technology has moved on a large amount since we first built that IT system. So we need something that's modern, we need something that's flexible, and we need something that's agile, basically something that is fit for the agency of today. We have undertaken an organisational redesign since we left the EU, and some of that is about bringing medicines and devices closer together, recognising that that is the way medicine is delivered and healthcare is delivered to patients, with closer alignment between those two areas. And we also need to be thinking about where we sit as an agency in our interactions with other regulatory authorities beyond Europe, and, as I've said before, the use of data. So an IT system will be the final, one of the final enablers to make this transformation complete. And we're very excited about being able to do that, because it's going to be really, really important for improving our efficiency and, of course, improving our service to you.
I think it's over to me now, Laura, is that right?
Yeah.
If we can move on to the next slide, please. I'm Claire Harrison, Chief Digital and Technology Officer. So Laura and I work very close together, not least on RMS, but lots of other things within the agency as well, on the corporate strategy and business plan, and RMS, its working title for now. Hopefully it'll get a more meaningful name later on. Is very much one of our top priorities. So I wanted to talk about how we're delivering the project, and the reason for that, it's just to really emphasise how much it's based on user needs. Laura used a term earlier, user-centred design, which I'll come to in a second, and why that's a benefit, and how stakeholders and different user groups will be involved. So I think many of you might be used to IT services and IT projects delivered that start with a business case, have a start date for a project, and then a stop date, and then it's just maintained. So we're following that approach to a degree, that sort of framework, but we're using what's called an agile delivery model. And so with that, it means as we build or buy, sometimes it's better to buy rather than build something ourselves. And as we're designing, we're constantly working with users. So whether it's external customers or whether it's users in Laura's team. So working really closely on a daily basis to elicit user needs, to get a view of what might be coming. Now, next and later is a term that I use from a policy and operations perspective, and thinking about how technology fits in with that, and constantly checking back and having a feedback loop. So the thing that we're, let's call building in this case, is meeting requirements. So what that means is users can see the progress constantly, so that it's not a surprise in a year or two when something's unveiled, and it's only then that we can see how close it matches user needs. So that's the benefits of using this model. Also, if we need to make changes, if a design wasn't quite right and so on, we can do that in situ almost, and again get that constant feedback as well. We, as part of an agile delivery model, we look at delivering in chunks. So again, Laura talked about a minimum viable product. So what that means is something that's useful to use for users to start to utilise, but it might not have all the bells and whistles. So as soon as something is useful to a user, they can start using it then. I'm saying use a lot there, I'm really conscious of that. So that's kind of the principles behind this delivery model. And the only thing I would add on this slide, and you can be moving to the next one please, and is another phrase that we use a lot with this delivery is product-centric model. So what that means, when I talked about projects having a business case, starting, maybe stopping after a year or two once something's delivered, in this case, we keep a team, a multidisciplinary team that consists of various disciplines, so a business analyst, some technical specialists, product managers, delivery manager, and so on. So all the time we have that core team that look after the product or the service that we're delivering, and in this case, RMS. So if there are any changes, and there always will be, continuous improvement, tweaks here, tweaks there, a policy change, an ops change, and so on, we don't have that starting and stopping like we have with more traditional project delivery methodologies. And so that helps them mitigate the risk of building our legacy systems of the future. So technology systems that are built over a period of time and then never really maintained and never really kept up to date and refreshed, and that's what happens with a lot of products. On this slide here, just quickly, you heard we talk about now, next and later, and the MVP, the chunks that we deliver over time, and this is what it looks like basically. To the left in the now are some common components and the infrastructure and technology basically that supports all the different products and chunks of functionality that we're delivering. So those are in the next, towards the end of this year. And after that, we keep adding to the minimum viable product. So the products that we're building and designing, we're adding extra functionality all the time for users to start using. And the later, it's the same principle. It will just be in a year or two, but of course we have the product-centric approach, which means that we'll always have a product team anyway to keep making those tweaks and keep making the product, maintaining it and refreshing it.
I think it's back to me again now, isn't it?
I think so, Tracy.
Yeah, okay. So we're going back to the beginning, I guess, in terms of the discovery phase. So you heard Claire and Laura talk there about the project starting in July 2022. And that's where we started doing our discovery phase. As the name suggests, what do we mean by discovery phase? Well, it is about discovering things. It's about unearthing things, finding out what the issues and the problems are with the system as it currently is, and the kind of the processes, what could be improved, what are working well. It's all about that discovery. And what we did at that point, starting in July 2022, we did a bit of parallel working really. We looked at the technology approach across MHRA, which was broader than the regulatory management system as it's currently referred to. It's bigger than this project. And that's really about looking at the sort of portfolio of projects that are happening across the organisation and looking at the approach to technology. So what do we use? What's going to be most efficient? What's going to help us going forward? And that needed to be a really broad piece of work and cover not just what's within the project scope, but also looking ahead to make sure we can support things that are going to be coming in future, things that are going to change in future, and to allow us to be flexible and also to scale what we do. So we'll start, as we've talked about, with a minimum viable product, and then what we'll do is we'll scale that and keep building it and continuously improving it. So that was a big piece of work to take a technology approach and start to think about what the needs are going forward. We also looked at the product approach as well, and that was more broad and shallow. So that involved looking across the full picture of regulatory activities for this particular project, And anything that's currently delivered on our IT systems of Sentinel and Lotus Notes were included. And so it was a very, very broad piece of work, and but quite shallow to a degree, but we did unearth quite a lot. This enabled us to establish a really deep understanding of the users of our services and develop some user journeys that would help us to understand the different steps that the users take now and the user needs, so that we can understand any particular pain points, start to document some of that and learn from it. And that essentially, all that information that we take in discovery, that helps us to make sure that we focus on the right things going forward. And we did a lot of engagement to make that happen. So that engagement's often referred to as user research. And this is about learning about people using our service, their wants and their needs. And as we've talked about already, this is internal and it's external. So the objectives here are exploring who the current and potential users of our services are, what is it they need to do, what the current practices, what are the current processes that people follow, what the pain points are, and really starting to understand those. And also what users need to do to complete their task more efficiently, and trying to understand that. And the research questions we often ask, they're very open questions. We talk about, what is the user journey like? What is it like for you? What's the most important thing to users when they engage with us in terms of their needs? What are the key pain points and what are users' needs? And what's the support needed from a digital service? And the rationale and the methodology we use here, we use a range of methodologies. We talk about surveys, which help us to reach a lot of people all at once. We talk about workshops. We sometimes have one-to-one engagement as well. We try to do all of this with some broad discussions, but also some deep dives. And also we try to sort of make sure we cover a real good cross-section of users to get a good sort of scope of feedback to help us move forward. So far, we've engaged with over 300 different users, internal and external, and that's involved 5 virtual research workshops with industry, 44 attendees, which obviously may not sound a lot initially, but we're going to build on that. That's a start. We've done 33 one-to-one interviews with end users, mainly internal users, and by that I'm referring to people within MHRA. We've done 2 surveys to industry, and we've had 167 complete responses. That's with market authorization holders, parallel imports, process license users. And we've also done lots of internal engagement as well with different teams, a very broad range of teams. And that's the start. So we did all of that in discovery, which told us a lot of information, but that is by no means the end. That's just the start of our engagement. So what have we uncovered to date? In terms of what we've unearthed around user needs, what we found is people telling us that they want better engagement, they want transparency with the agency in terms of communications, transparency of processes, clearer guidance, and an audit trail of what's happening. They want more efficient ways of working, for example, everything in one place. They want ability to do reporting, payments, invoices. They want visibility of position in the process. Where are they in terms of their application, and being able to see that status. The ability to self-serve, particularly low-risk applications, and more training and engagement for industry. And the current pain points are things around usability issues of interfaces, errors that are completely unclear, complicated processes, lots of repetition and ambiguity, inconsistent timeliness and delays in receiving responses, and communication issues with the agency. I'm not sure if all of that chimes with people on the call today. I'm hoping some of it does, but as I say, this is just the start. What we'd look to do is build on that as we move forward with some of the concept testing and also the usability as we start to build the new service. But I'm going to pass you back to Laura and Claire now to talk to you about how we've used that information to inform our work going forward.
Thanks very much, Tracy. So if we can pop on to the next slide. I think this is probably one of the things that people will be most interested in. I mean, Tracy has mentioned, well, we've mentioned a number of times the user-centered design and all of the workshops that we've had and communications that we've had to date. And that has come up with some clear priorities, which are now on this slide. And the first one, I think, is very, very clear, which is about a greater transparency of where applications are within the MHRA internal process and visibility of timelines. Because one of the clear messages that we're getting is that applicants need to be able to plan, they need to know where things are. I think that's also a really, really important one for us as well, because I think some of these will enable us to move away from some of the activities we're doing now, which is dealing with inquiries and process changes, and the second one on validations and what goes wrong when we have an invalid application. So automating some of that and giving greater visibility to the system, I think, will help applicants, but it will also greatly help us as well to be able to divert our resources to what they should be doing, and that is doing the job of scientific assessment of all these processes. So these are the priorities that we've come up with from the initial research, but there will be opportunities still to feed in, as we've said, as we move forward. So if we just pop onto the next slide. So we have got quite an ambitious delivery timeframe, and what we've said is we'll deliver the minimum viable product towards the end of this year. But there is an awful lot happening now. So this is a parallel delivery model where we'll be building different parts of the system in parallel, and the technical platform that underpins the core services is already starting to be built now. So whilst there won't be things that people can use externally until we actually put the MVP up, an awful lot of activity is happening now to put things in place to prepare for that. We did have quite a lot of conversations about whether we could do the minimum viable product earlier, but felt that really something that would be viable, i.e. useful for MHRA and useful for users, for applicants, was something that included all of these components. So it really could be a meaningful system which we can use. So these are being delivered in parallel now, in preparation for later during the year when we issue the minimum viable product, but very much informed by all of the information that we got from the workshops that Tracy has talked about and the communications that we have talked about. Claire, do you want to talk about the design principles?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't talk through each of these boxes. Let me just give you an overview of basically what they're saying. So whenever we're designing a system, a service, a product, we're obviously focusing on that particular system, but all the time we're aligning it with our agency context and our external environment. So that might include taking advantage of technology innovations that might be happening outside of the agency. So I won't say chat GPT today, whoops, just done it, but there's those kinds of things. We're always doing our own horizon scanning and looking at different innovations and how they might sometimes drive and sometimes enable the thing that we're building, that we're delivering. Following these principles as well helps us to decide what to deliver, what to prioritise. So for example, how does this system, whatever system we're delivering, how does that support putting patient and public safety first? And again, through the work that Tracy's team do and how she's described that close contact with users through discovery and understanding what it is that they need to do all the time, we can link it then to how we're delivering on that mission. We might also learn from partners in the tech industry or other comparable organisations, which might be a global regulator, for example. I'm in touch with some of my peers around the globe who've done a similar thing as RMS and learning from their lessons the best way to do things, or things we might want to avoid, and equally others can learn from us as well. I think in all of our systems anyway, just another sort of digital and technology principle in my area. Laura talked about automation, and that definitely is a good design principle. So eradicating manual processes, so saving users of the system that time and effort so they can add value in their area of specialism rather than trying to navigate admin in a clunky system, and using data and evidence to help decide where, for example, Laura's team might want to focus rather than just following the same process all the time or the same schedule around inspections and so on. It just helps us be a bit smarter around our interventions. If we can move on to the next slide, just a quick overview of this. Basically, when I talked about our context, we're a public sector organisation, and we have to obviously and want to passionate about delivering value for money there from a taxpayer's perspective. So as we're following what's called GDS, Government Digital Services Service Design Manual, there are lots of, it's bigger than a checklist, and we have assessments on the thing that it is that we're building, so RMS in this case, to say how smart we're being with our design, our technology selections, how closely we're working with users, so we're assessed and we either pass or we don't, and that has implications about where it can be hosted and so on. So the purpose of that is to make sure that whatever it is that we're designing and delivering aligns with government digital services. That ultimately leads to those efficiencies and value for money from a taxpayer perspective. I think GDPR legislation does what it says on the tin, and then of course we will follow and want to follow GPDR design best practice. But also, again, just thinking from a stakeholder perspective or a user of the system perspective, we want to align to particular standards and principles across the regulatory ecosystem, if you like, or health ecosystem. So at least then there's some consistency and levels of interoperability. So trying to get the experience, whether it's submitting an application or so on, similar where appropriate to others. So customers don't always have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch. And equally, from a user of the system, again, just thinking about who those users and how the business might want to interact with, external to the agency and internally as well. So making sure that what we're designing and delivering has standards and design principles and so on that will make that interoperability, those aspects, a lot easier and more efficient. And just finally, adhering to all of those principles, it really helps us keep our systems and our technology as future-proof, if you like, as possible. So always thinking about, I always think about avoiding designing what I call legacy systems of the future. So we don't have to go back with big business cases and spending a lot of money on improving those all the time. If we're using the right design principles, the right technology, keeping in touch with users and stakeholders, that really helps us get closer to guaranteeing those future-proof systems. If we move on to the next slide, I think that's everything from me at this point.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Clara. I think that's me. So the what comes next is really more about how you can get involved. It's really important to us that this is a system which works for users, whether they are external applicants and customers of the MHRA, or whether they were internal employees and assessors and inspectors. And in order to achieve that, we need to keep consulting and keep talking. And also we need you to be ready for the new system when it comes up, and system readiness and on the internally and externally is really, really important for us. So we've talked about the discovery phase, and whilst that is completed, we still have the opportunity to continue to engage, and we will engage throughout the project. And that means that also might mean that we're gathering requirements that we can't do anything with before the minimum viable product, but which we can incorporate later when we get to improvement phases. But we're really, really keen to hear and understand how we can do this. I have a mantra that I'm implying to this all of the time, which is eliminate, don't do things we don't need to do, automate and simplify. And I'm really, really keen that we try to do that with this system. So the user research is key to this, having the workshops that we've been having and the user research interviews to really understand in depth what is happening for the different processes. And a lot of those have involved teams within my area of HQ&A. We will continue to communicate with you. We have the MHRA quarterly industry meeting. We will have regular trading association meetings, and this is the first of webinars which we intend to run. So if you haven't been involved in the discovery phase, this is probably, as Tracy said, your first introduction to this system. And then as we get closer to launch, we'll be looking at things like user acceptance testing. So people can really start then to get an idea of the look and feel of the system and start to test it and see if it works. It will work, but see how it works, I should say. So if we just go to the next slide, please. So in order to get this communication right, as we've said, this is the first of these. We really need to understand what you want to know. What do you want to know? What do you want to hear about? And how do you want to hear about it? How often do you want to hear from us? And what are the sorts of things that you're really interested in? So you can tell us about that. We will have a post-webinar survey. We're also going to have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So we're really interested to hear from you. This is really about how you can help us to help you. We will have share the future contact via the normal MHRA channels. So we'll have emails, we'll have webinars, and we'll have the MHRA website. So just the last slide really is to say, please do get involved. Express your interest on the post-webinar survey. We need to hear from a broad group of people. We need to hear from a broad group of users in order to get this absolutely right. So very grateful for you attending today. I'm very grateful for your interest for that coming forward.
So from my perspective, I just wanted to quickly say thank you again to everybody for taking the time to join us today. I do hope you found it really sort of interesting and informative. And I'd say there's obviously a lot of information that we've thrown your way in terms of what we've done, what we've still got to do, where we are, and where our focus is. But what I'd sort of urge is, if you can take one thing away, it would be that we are listening and we do want to work together to kind of co-design our new services and to work with you on usability testing them. So, you know, we are listening is a key message I'd certainly like to give. I don't know if you wanted to say any final words, Claire, Laura?
Just thank you, to second what you said, basically, Tracy, thank you to everyone who joined, and thank you, Tracy, for hosting us. You've done a really good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, and look forward to continuing to working with you over the next however long to get this launched and improved.